politician who was working behind the back of the country's founding president to gain power. The West was checking the spread of communism and was not ready to lose the newly independent state to the East.
The two were played by international governments. Kenyatta, pro-West.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Mimi, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
It is the ultimate prize of political power in Kenya. State House.
Nitalinda
na kuitumikia kwa moyo wangu wote, na kwamba
this is both the symbol and home of the Kenyan presidency.
Amekuwa amiri jeshi mkuu wa majeshi yote ya ulinzi ya Kenya.
So vicious are the contests for political power in Kenya.
Hakuna serikali ya nusu mkate.
It is a blood sport that finds its roots in an ugly fallout between two of Kenya's founding fathers, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and Oginga Odinga.
I, Jomo Kenyatta, being chosen.
When Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya, took the oath of office, a nation of 8 million Kenyans was oblivious of the clashing currents that characterized the Cold War between the Western world, fronted by the United States of America, and the Eastern Bloc that revolved around the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR.
Of Kenya. I, Jomo Kenyatta, do swear that I will be faithful and true.
Former Cabinet Minister Brudi Nabwera was Kenya's first ambassador to the United States. He was a key player in ensuring Kenya related well with the most powerful man on the planet and the United Nations. His job began several months before Kenya's independence as Jomo Kenyatta and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga ignited passions among Kenyans.
before that, and even moving into the elections and after the elections, the Jaramogi was definitely the undisputed deputy of Mzee Kenyatta, and they liked each other and they worked very closely, and whatever they did they shared. So Jaramogi had a lot of influence, like the appointment of cabinet, appointment of various was the target for KANU then was to try and discourage tribalism and build a nation.
But predictably, and barely 3 years after independence, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga tendered his resignation. He had resolved to relinquish his position as vice president. A vicious fight in the post-independence Kenya had reached a point of no return for the man later to be called the doyen of opposition politics in Kenya. At the point of resignation, Oginga Odinga claimed that the government was in the hands of master-serving foreign interests.
You know, I came to know Mzee Kenyatta by being introduced by Jaramogi and friends.
Indeed, Jomo Kenyatta towered among Kenyans agitating for change. He was much older than his freedom struggle colleagues. But also oozed the air of a de facto leader in the group, complete with unmatched presence.
I have spoken enough in this language. It is not my wish that I should be speaking to you in a foreign, and for that matter, in colonialistic language.
He was the symbol for resistance.
Some of them have misunderstood us, and it's only by our action they will know that we mean business.
He's capable, is completely well informed, and I am satisfied with him.
He was, as a result, the unchallenged pick for all leaders, including Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who rejected an offer by the colonial masters that would have made him the first prime minister of a self-governing Kenya. Not swayed by the royalty of being the first among equals, a whisk-displaying Odinga instead demanded that for independence to be realized, Jomo Kenyatta had to be released.
Jomo Kenyatta is the father of the African nationalism and the African national movement in this country.
But surely you're all rather more advanced than he is in your thinking about politics. Wouldn't he embarrass you if he was really let go now?
We cannot in any sense be more advanced than our teacher and master.
Kenyatta, now under restriction, had been moved to Lodwar, still in the harsh conditions of northern Kenya. He was joined by his fourth wife, Ngina, and was allowed occasional visits.
Jaramogi, with the other African members, asked the colonial government to allow them to visit Mzee Kenyatta. They visited, so they discussed politics and the future of the country.
Elections in 1961 brought in an African majority in the Legislative Council for the first time. But until Kenyatta was released, the leading party KANU refused to participate in the government.
And after the Jaramogi had joined Legislative Council with Wakina Ngala and Akina Masinde Muliro, President Moi and Ronald, the attack in the parliament. And Jaramogi stood up and said, unless and until Mzee Kenyatta was released to lead the African people, it would be very difficult for the Africans to accept another person as a leader of Kenya. The majority of African people, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was their second god.
And Uhuru and Kenyatta meant that Kenya should attain its independence after the release of Jomo Kenyatta and the other fighters that had been imprisoned with him in Kapenguria and elsewhere.
Oh, you were here?
I was in Parliament in 1963. That's when I was elected first in Parliament.
On August the 14th, 1961, Kenyatta came home.
They had now to work hard to know Kenyatta's views when he's released. Kenyatta told him he will be no different. He has been always the Kenyatta. They know. But the settlers said they wanted to hear directly from him. So they arranged for a meeting in Nakuru. And of course, Kenyatta didn't refuse, he went there.
When do you want independence for Kenya? Today. What means are you ready to adopt to achieve independence?
Constitutional means.
At an age estimated to be above 70, Jomo Kenyatta became Kenya's first prime minister and a year later, first president. The Swahili word for pulling together, Harambee, which had Indian origins, became Mzee Kenyatta's unity idea for the new nation. Kenyatta wasted little time in exerting his authority while showcasing his style of doing things.
And at that time, the relationship between him and Kenyatta was fantastic. They carried a fly whisk. They were both wearing the beaded caps.
I think I'm 95 years now.
Dr. Charles Rubia was Nairobi's African mayor a year before independence.
Racial segregation was there. This area, for example, was only for Europeans, where we are not.
But the newly independent Kenya would quickly fall into the trap of vicious ideological tussle known as the Cold War.
And people like in Africa were being tossed up and down by the world powers. I think in our case, you see, Jaramogi Oginga was very close to the Chinese and the communists. And the Western world, America and Britain and so on, were against communists.
This powerful nation, the Western countries, were led by the Americans, and the Eastern countries by the Soviet Union, and now China, sort of forced the world to be in two groups, so you had to be with one or the other. But Kenya had declared that we were non-aligned, and those are the instructions for us as ambassadors. That's what we explained. But meanwhile, their ambassadors were busy in the host capitals. Like here, we had a very active American ambassador called William Atwood. Very, very busy. They were busy working on our politicians, on our ministers, you know. So they created a local conflict. The Chinese were also very active. The Russians were very active. So instead of Kanu remaining solid, now the president found himself being supported by two groups that were equally strong. So Tom Mboya came to know Bidona, and even the parliament became divided.
Those same colonial, forces, but now together with people from within Kanu and outside Kanu.
The fallout between Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and Oginga Odinga was gradual and began even before they realized it. In the run-up to 1963, the British started laying plans for their own exit and granting of independence to Kenya, and retired President Daniel Arap Moi, then the head of the Kenya African Democratic Union (KADU), was the man the British spies identified as the trusted pair of hands to have in a key position after independence. The British intelligence created good working relations between Moi and Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, leading to the dissolution of the opposition party KADU to join Kenyatta's KANU. Moi was appointed the minister in charge of Home Affairs. Upon the assassination of J.F. Kennedy in 1963, Mboya's shine in the White House paled. Moi was the new darling.
The late Tom Mboya was equally ambitious, a capable leader, but I think in the order of things it was quite obvious that the natural order of things would be that Jaramogi would be the natural successor. And of course, if you go to the records, Mboya himself was not terribly enthusiastic about the releases of Jomo Kenyatta. The person who really fought tooth and nail for his release was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga.
To the American intelligence, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was a power-hungry politician who was working behind the back of the country's founding president to gain power. The West was checking the spread of communism and was not ready to lose the newly independent state to the East.
The two were played by international governments. Kenyatta, pro-West, Jaramogi, pro-East. And I think that is where the difference came from. I think they were also playing very dirty game through CIA from America and KGB from Russia.
The British and the Americans painted Odinga as Kenyatta's opponent. For 50 years, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, was the vanguard of America's Cold War against the Soviet Empire. Secrecy was their shield, covert operations their weapons. In Kenya, its strategy was to create divisions among leaders. This was easy for the CIA, given Jaramogi Oginga Odinga's links to the East. The classified documents show how the CIA painted Odinga as a deputy who undermined the leadership of his boss. By using overt and covert means, they destroyed the very fabric that held Kenyatta and Jaramogi together, and they forced the government to crumble.
The West at that time was not comfortable with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. The only time they were comfortable with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was when Kenyatta was in detention, when they had described Kenyatta as the leader of darkness and death. And they had this image of Kenyatta being a rebel and a communist, because they thought, having stayed in Moscow for a little while, that he was a fire-eating kind of revolutionary. And therefore, anything should be done to stop him from becoming president. But we remember after that Nakuru meeting with the settlers, they were persuaded now that Kenyatta could become president or leader of an independent Kenya. And then now the fires and the spears were turned against.
According to the CIA, Burudi Nabwera, then Kenya's ambassador to the US, was an Odinga ally. CIA documents declassified in 2008 states, as Minister of Home Affairs, he was able to remove a Kikuyu civil servant as head of the passport department and replace him with a loyal Luo. The Kenyan ambassador to the UN and US is an Odinga partisan, as is the Minister of Information, Acheng Oneko. According to the CIA, Jaramogi had packed the civil service with his cronies. They claimed he had doled out political ledgers in terms of scholarships and money to his supporters, and even sponsored political candidates into parliament and asked them to defeat some government motions. The documents also claim that Jaramogi had secret pacts with communist countries without Kenyatta's authority, including the training of his own private army.
There were a lot of supporters of very close people to Kenyatta who did not want Jaramogi. Mm-hmm. So in many cases, they started creating stories about Jaramogi bringing in a firearms he wants to topple Kenyatta. That was not very true.
In one of the documents prepared on July 31st, 1964, from the CIA's Office of Current Intelligence, and which was reviewed by the State Department, the CIA detailed instances it believed Jaramogi was plotting a power grab against Kenyatta. The Americans did not hide their disdain for Odinga, an assessment which they made in an intelligence analysis titled Independent Kenya's Prospects under Jomo Kenyatta, dated December 6, 1963, just 6 days to independence. Later that December, Jaramogi visited the US and became a darling of the civil rights movement that the US establishment loved to hate. Back then, a non-violent group of youth even composed a song in honor and praise of Jaramogi. In fact, renowned civil rights activist Malcolm X often quoted Jaramogi to motivate blacks to fight for freedom. The spies claimed then that Jaramogi was using his position as Home Affairs Minister and his position as the second in command within the ruling party KANU and his near total command over the Luo community to make a move. Oginga Odinga said then that he believed in the idea of non-alignment of the countries of the South.
Those who think of me like that are very wrong indeed. I only laugh at them because they are short-minded and they don't know what they're doing. Why I appear to be pro-East is because the weight has been so heavily overweighted on the western side, because Kenya has been under British and the Americans' influence here is also very strong. And in order to be neutral, I might appear as if I'm pulling the weight in order to balance it towards the east.
The documents read in part, Odinga has used these various sources of power interchangeably or simultaneously to operate just as he pleases, placing supporters where he wants them, running roughshod through the domains of other ministers and frequently presenting Kenyatta with accomplished facts which the latter is unwilling or unable to reverse. Within 3 years of independence, Kenyatta's policies were challenged by an opposition party led by some of his colleagues during the pre-emergency period.
When he formed his party of KPU, some of us had gone with him. Professor Julia had gone. I went and told her not to go because I knew what was happening in the government. And we knew Odinga was going to lose.
3 years later, the Kenya People's Union Party was banned. Oginga Odinga, its president and the man who had resurrected Kenyatta's name during the emergency, Bildad Kagia and Achengo Oneko, who had been sentenced with Kenyatta at Kapenguria, and several other politicians were detained without trial. But it was a series of mysterious deaths of top politicians that escalated matters. A freedom fighter of the Goan descent, Pio Gama Pinto, was the first to be assassinated, almost 365 days after the murder of Pinto. Followed a series of well-calculated moves to liquidate Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, then Vice President of Kenya, and the governing party, KANU. The man believed to have been behind the anti-Odinga scheme was Tom Mboya, the political genius who was for Jomo Kenyatta, Mr. Fix-It.
And if you look at the portfolio Jaramogi had at that time of independence, it was a very powerful portfolio he had. He was in charge of home affairs, which meant what is now internal security. And of course, the chemistry between the two leaders.
Imagine a man so powerful,
both
so
from
feared, that crossing
Kenyatta's
him
perspective
could end your career
and
in
from
an instant.
Jaramogi's perspective. Things were going to fall naturally into play.
A man who changed cars up to 10 times a day. But Tom Mboya did not last long after playing part in the removal of Oginga Odinga from the political equation. In 1969, he was gunned down after stepping out of a chemist along the current Moi Avenue Street.
The king in waiting.
That era of 1980s,
the government began being suspected
is the story
of
Nicholas
killing
Kipyegon Arap Biwott.
Head broke news in Kisumu when President Jomo Kenyatta visited the town to officially open the Nyanza Regional Hospital, which ironically now bears Jaramogi's name.
People wanted Kenyatta to the aggressiveness was so strong.
For 24 years, from 1978 to 2002, Daniel Arap Moi ruled Kenya with an iron grip. But behind the president stood a man who many believed had the power of resolving complex or problematic political situations, often behind the scenes. Nicholas Biwott.
But he had also learned from Moi, don't show off. Don't. The people know about, they knew about him afterwards, they hear rumor about, but you didn't see Biwott anywhere showing off. But his voice was listened to very carefully. You decide what should happen. If the president has no objection, it will happen.
Karnet, meaning still in Kalenjin, Biwott was the ultimate insider, a master strategist. He was Loi's right-hand man, a man with a knack for troubleshooting, the one who got things done, the one you never wanted to cross. Cross him and you would find yourself out of a job.
But upon the death of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta in 1978, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga acknowledged the difference between the two of them, but maintained that they remained family friends.
Short and rich. He looked pensive much of the time. Just go and look for pictures. It's in audience. It's like a man who is thinking. And then there was this rife rumors of him having connections with security agencies in Israel. The Mossad, in view of the reality that one of his wives is actually Israeli. That is a bit intimidating, even if it were a small man like you and me.
First, let's get to know the man. Nicholas Kipyetor Kiprono Arap Biwott was born in February 1940 in Chebior village, Keyo district in Kenya's Rift Valley. Listen, this wasn't someone born with a silver spoon. His father, Cheserem Soti, was a cattle herder and market trader. Biwott worked hard, studying at the University of Melbourne, where he earned a degree in economics and political science. Now picture this. It's the early 1960s and a young Biwott starts his career as a district officer, a low-level but critical role in the colonial government. By 1965, shortly after Kenya gained independence, he rises to district commissioner, overseeing the region that includes today's Meru and Tharaka Nithi counties.
That's a huge area to cover, eh?
Which are now 2 counties.
Yes, and to govern, to rule people around. You deal with issues like who stole whose chicken and goat. You run over and the chiefs have to report to you and you tell them what to do. You become the judge. In fact, DOs are judges or magistrates without calling them so.
At this particular time, Biwott acquires the art of governance and the dark tactics of colonial control.
You are taught how to control people and govern them and maybe mobilize them. You are a government, you are a little king in an area.
As a quick learner, he sees this firsthand. In Meru, he plays a pivotal role in resettling some Mau Mau freedom fighters after Kenya's bloody fight for independence. But here is the twist. Not everyone got a fair deal. By favoring some and sidelining others, Biwott sowed seeds of division that will linger on for decades. In an independent Kenya, Nicholas Biwott's star will shine brighter.
I could recall his history when he was assistant to Bruce Mackenzie, how he grew up in business, his connection with the Mossad.
His sharp mind and knack for navigating power caught the eye of a rising political Kalenjin giant, Daniel Arap Moi, Kenya's third vice president, who was appointed following the subsequent resignations of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Joseph Murumbi. Moi. The year is 1977 and Moi taps Biwott as his personal assistant. This was no small gig. It puts Biwott at the heart of Kenya's political machine.
Which also gave him a lot of mileage in terms of knowing what... See, the vice president was always traveling.
Yeah.
Because Jomo did not travel, Moi traveled. So he got more exposure on the way the government works.
Imagine a man so powerful, so feared, that crossing him could end your career in an instant.
He was a punching bag of the Moi regime.
A man who changed cars up to 10 times a day to stay one step ahead of his enemies.
Naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
Call him Total Man, Mr. Fix-It, the bull of Auckland. When Moi becomes president in 1978, Biwott's ascent went into overdrive. This is the story of Nicholas 79 as Daniel Moi was elected president unopposed following the lapse of the constitutional 90 days. Biwott took a bold leap. He ran for parliament in the first general election of the Moi era and won.
I, Beata Nicholas, the brother of the world.
This wasn't just a seat. For 24 years, from 1978 he was appointed minister in the office of the president, a role that Kenya gave him with an immense influence on Moi's inner circle. But behind the president stood a man who many believed had the power of resolving complex or problematic political situations,
but the same job.
Often behind the scenes.
Being the eyes,
Nicholas
and Biwott. But he had also learned from Moi in the years of the president. Don't.
I want to believe
Did people know about? They knew about him afterwards, or they would hear room about. But you didn't see Biwott anyway.
And they were very complementary. Moi was older, less educated, isn't it? Nicholas was younger, more educated, and had much more exposure than his maker, Daniel Arap Moi.
So they were together like this. Actually, got up, Biwott became is like Kenyatta and Jomo Kenyatta. Very close to each other. The president needs somebody he or she can trust. Does not mean this person is the one who decides. In the same way that Mbio is not the one who decided things, but he decided some things. And Biwott is not the one who decided things, although he might have decided some things, because he had the trust of the president.
From a colonial officer to cabinet minister, Biwott had mastered the art and game of power. Look, some call him the man behind the throne, orchestrating Kenya's political machine with precision. But who was this man? And how did he wield so much influence?
Who was Nicholas Biwott?
Total Man. I know that by the name of Total Man.
Why was he called Total Man?
I don't know.
But you know he was called the Total Man.
He was the right hand of President Moi Kenyatta.
You know Nicholas Biwott?
Yes.
Who was Nicholas Biwott?
Total Man.
Total. Why was he called Total Man?
He was a killer.
Can you prove that he was a killer?
He was a killer. Total Man.
What was his job before Moi became president?
He was a spokesman, I think. Moi spokesman.
Moi spokesman?
Yeah.
During Daniel Arap Moi's presidency, Nicholas Biwott wasn't just a minister. He was the man who called the shots.
And Biwott, from the way he rises all along, he was used as a means to take off pressure from Moi. You remember consistently we'll say Moi is good. Alitupatia maziwa. He has started what he used to call vyuo vikuu vya university. Kila mahali, he opened up education system. Moi will appear like the most magnanimous of the presidents that we have ever had. Lakini shida yake ni Biwott. Evil man. That is actually the role Biwott played in Moi's political chessboard, nationally and among the Kalenjins. He will take the branches that were meant for Moi.
From land deals to massive energy projects, Biwott left his mark on Kenya's history like few others. Let's break it down for you. In 1979, as minister in the office of the president, Biwott was at the heart of a land scandal. Teaming up with Gigi Kariuki, he orchestrated a massive land redistribution scheme. State land managed by the Agricultural Development Corporation (ADC) was handed out to civil servants and defense forces officers. Why? Some say it was a tactic to secure loyalty to Moi's new regime, and it didn't stop there. The Agricultural Finance Corporation stepped in, offering loans to help these new landowners develop their farms. Biwott wasn't just playing politics, he was reshaping Kenya's power structure. But that was just the start. In 1982, Kenya was rocked by a failed coup attempt, and President Moi was done being underestimated. Labeled a passing cloud by his rivals, Moi was ready to strike back and show who was really in charge. His mission? Dismantle the old guards and secure his grip on power. Enter the new power players. Nicholas Biwott, a cunning strategist, Simeon Nyachai, a rising star in Moi's inner circle, and Hezekiah Oyugi, a key provincial commissioner. These men were Moi's secret weapons in a scheme to upend Kenya's political elite. At the center of their crosshairs, the untouchable Charles Njonjo, a cabinet minister and one of Kenya's most influential figures. The stage was set on May 8, 1983 at a fundraiser in Kisii organized by Simeon Nyachai. Picture this, thousands of people gathered, primary schools in need of support, and President Moi as the chief guest.
Lazima nyinyi wazazi mujue kwamba kazi yetu ni kujenga, kazi yetu ni kuangalia kwamba kila shule ina facilities za kutosha, mahitaji